Hi guys, thanks for joining me again on my YouTube channel. This is Cheriel Brown. I am the owner of Third Person Omniscient Productions, and first and foremost I am a screenwriter. I started producing movies so that I could make my screenplays that I wrote, and I like to do these videos because I like to point out different elements and aspects of screenwriting from the movies that I watch. And I think that that could help you guys sometimes by pointing these things out, because even though you might watch movies and you might have watched movies your whole life, that doesn't mean that you can pick out the strategies that they're using when they're writing the screenplay. So I like to point those out, and if I'm not talking about an aspect or element of screenwriting, then I like to talk about how the movies aim to help us to make our lives better, so that we can a lot of times deal with the problems that we have, or either get ideas to help make our dreams come true. So the movie that I want to talk about today is Honey Boy, and that is a film that is written by the actor Shia LaBeouf, and it is based on his fraught relationship with his father, as he was a child star, and his father was kind of helping him manage his career and just kind of being the chaperone and guardian when he was on set. So this particular movie, it is inspired by actual events between him and his father, but Shia does not use his own name, and he presumably doesn't use the name of his father either. The characters' names are Otis. Otis is the character that represents Shia LaBeouf, played by the young Otis is played by Noah Jupe, and the 21-year-old Otis is played by Lucas Hedges. And Shia LaBeouf plays his father. And in the movie Honey Boy, his father's name is James. First of all, I just want to say that Honey Boy was such a good script. I take my hat off to Shia LaBeouf, because I'm like, you know, when I meet Shia, my first question for him is, did you learn how to write a screenplay by osmosis? And by that, I mean, did he learn how to write a brilliant screenplay just from being around the business for so long because he grew up around it? Or did he actually go and take screenwriting courses and, you know, actually learn the craft of writing a screenplay? I'm very curious about that because it's such a great script. I'm going to talk about the aspect of motif in this video, just like I talked about in one of my previous videos from last week. I talked about the use of motif in the movie Flight, which was directed by Robert Zemeckis, and it starred Denzel Washington as Whitaker. And I'm going to leave a link down in the description from that previous video that I did talking about motif. And if you're not familiar with the term motif, a lot of times it is used when referencing music, when you're referring to a symphony. A motif is a certain melody that repeats itself over and over again throughout the piece. And when you use motif in a screenplay, a motif is a thematic element that's repeated over and over again throughout the script. And usually that thematic element is repeated to try to make a point, to try to say something about life. I used to teach my English students when I taught high school that theme is, you know, when you are talking about the theme of a movie, you're not really going to be able to tell what the theme is in one word. Like, for example, in the movie Flight, I talked about the God motif because that popped up over and over again, where they're trying to make a point that Whip, the character, needed to, you know, get his life right because he was an alcoholic. Now, theme is not one word. So you wouldn't say that the theme of Flight was God. You would say what the movie was trying to say about life. Theme is not just so simple as a subject. Theme is what was the piece of art trying to say about life. And so if you go back to the movie Honey Boy, they had a motif that repeated over and over again throughout the movie that I happened to notice the first time I watched the movie. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like what does this mean? I have to figure out what this motif means. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the different instances where I noticed this motif in the movie Honey Boy. And then afterwards, I'm going to talk about what I think it means. Of course, I could be wrong because I'm not Shia. I didn't write the script, but this is from watching the movie. At this point, I've seen the movie about 3 times. And the first time I watched it, I didn't really understand what the motif, I call it the chicken motif, because there's a reoccurrence of chickens over and over and over again in the movie. And I was like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And I'll tell you what I came to conclude that it meant when I finished going through the instances. So in the last video that I did about the motif in the movie Flight, that motif popped up 8 different times. And in the movie Honey Boy, they had a similar number of occurrences of the chicken motif. It popped up 7 times. Okay, so these are the times that I noticed the chicken motif in Honey Boy. It starts right away, like in the third scene of the movie, where we meet James, who is Otis's father. And James is talking to one of the women who works on set where Otis is working. And James is talking about his former life as a rodeo clown. And when he was a rodeo clown, he had a chicken. And the chicken's name was Cheriel LaBeouf, the world's first daredevil chicken. And he tells her about this, and he's, you know, kind of like really happy about it. He's actually trying to get the woman's phone number, so he's trying to impress her, talking about how good he was as a rodeo clown, blah, blah, blah. Second instance of this chicken motif is when the 21-year-old Otis has a dream where he sees his father on the TV screen dressed up as fully clothed as a rodeo clown. And in the previous scene where he was telling Pam about his act with Henrietta LaFowl, the chicken, you actually see this act play out on the TV screen in Otis's dream. Now, you don't really know that this is a dream until they show a shot of Otis waking up. And you're like, okay, well, obviously his father wasn't on TV in the present. This is, you know, just a dream, a representation of what his father used to do. So that's the second instance of the chicken motif. The third instance of the chicken motif is, you know, Otis is at rehab. He's trying to deal with some issues. He's gotten arrested for like the 3rd or 4th time for, you know, drinking and driving, and he had a terrible accident. And so he's in rehab, and one of his tasks is to take care of the chicken coop in rehab. So this is the third instance of this chicken motif. The fourth instance of the chicken motif is Otis is 21 years old in rehab. He's juggling because this movie takes place back and forth between flashbacks of when Otis is 12 and then, you know, the present day when he's in rehab trying to figure out why he has PTSD and why he has these violent outbursts. And why he drinks so much also. And so the fourth instance of the chicken motif is Otis is juggling. And we see from the flashback scenes that this is a skill that James has taught Otis from his days as a rodeo clown. He's taught him how to juggle. I recently took a quest on Mind Valley with Jim Quick about using your super brain. And Jim points out, I took 2 quests with Jim Quick, actually, the speed reading quest and the super brain quest. And Jim points out that juggling actually improves your brain power and it helps you focus. And as an actor, you know, Otis has been acting since he was a little kid. As an actor, that's great to, like, you know, work on his focus and work on like making both sides of his brain work. That may not be the reason why James taught him how to juggle. It just might have been a skill that he knew how to do that he passed on to his son. But I thought that little bit of backstory was interesting, which I just recently learned before watching the movie for the 3rd time. So the fourth instance, as I said, is Otis is juggling and he notices a sound. Something moves in the room. He's inside the rehab center and he goes to the table that's nearby and he looks underneath the table and there's a chicken. There's this one lone chicken that's gotten out of the coop and is just hanging out chilling. So that's the fourth instance of the chicken motif. The fifth instance of the chicken motif doesn't even have an actual chicken in it. I should mention that when you have a motif, these motifs, the representation of the motif can be visual or it can just be, it could come out through dialogue. So in Honey Boy, there's a mixture of both visual and verbal representations of the chicken motif. So the fifth instance of the chicken motif is Otis is having a very serious conversation with his father, and you know, he wants to know, like, why don't you hold my hand in public? There was a scene earlier in the movie where they're walking up to a taco stand, they're holding hands, and as soon as they get around an area where there are other people, James drops Otis's hand, and the director decided to shoot that their hands in a close-up. So you're just looking at their hands, their clasped hands together, and then you notice that once they get around other people, James drops Otis's hand. So in this scene, the 5th instance of the chicken motif, Otis wants to know why James won't hold his hand in public. So James had just told him, I tell the truth, you know, I'm a lot of things, but a liar is not one of them. So Otis takes this opportunity to find out why his father, you know, won't hold his hand, because to Otis, that's like, you just won't show me affection. Like, why don't you love me? That's kind of what Otis is, you know, asking or hinting at. And James tells him, I don't want people to think I'm a chicken hawk. So I'm like, okay, I have a pretty good idea what chicken hawk means, but I'm not really sure. So I Googled it. I looked it up. What does chicken hawk mean? Chicken hawk is an older man who looks for sexual favors from young boys. So, you know, James doesn't want people to think that. So that's, you know, people don't know that that's his son or whatever. So that's his reason for why he doesn't hold his hand around other people or in public. Okay, so the 6th instance of this chicken motif is Otis again at rehab, and he's outside and he sees this chicken, which is presumably the same chicken that was under the table when he was juggling. And you get the impression in the movie that every time Otis sees a chicken or has any type of interaction with chickens, that it reminds him of his father. So in this 6th instance of the chicken motif, Otis begins to follow this chicken. The chicken is walking along in a straight path, minding his business, and Otis starts to follow the chicken. So this scene is very smartly intercut with other things. So he's following the chicken along the chicken's path, and that scene is intercut with James in a flashback showing 12-year-old Otis where he has been growing marijuana on the side of the freeway. Because earlier in the movie, Otis asked James to get him a tree house, and he's like, how am I going to get you a tree house? We don't have a tree. So James gets the idea to start growing marijuana on the side of the freeway. That's, you know, in his mind, that's something he's doing for his son. So he takes Otis to where he's been growing the weed, and, you know, basically they sit and, you know, James wraps the joint for him, and Otis has his first joint. And, you know, every time, like, Otis smokes a cigarette in the movie, or, you know, in this instance, the 6th instance of the chicken motif where he's smoking weed with his father's not actually smoking weed, it's just Otis smoking. He's letting him smoke his first joint. All of this is, like, you know, it might seem kind of like, you know, like a bad influence, but this is basically how they bond. So, there's an intercut of 21-year-old Otis following this chicken, and 12-year-old Otis hanging out with his dad on the side of the freeway smoking weed for the first time. And then there's a audio voiceover where James is telling Otis that he comes from a very long line of alcoholics. And alcoholism is featured very heavily through this film. I'm going to do some other videos that, like, break down scene by scene the great scenes that are in Honey Boy, because, like I said, it's a really, really well-written script. And I want to highlight some of the magnificent scenes that they have in that movie, but I'll do a separate video about that. And so, you know, that's the 6th instance, which is a very powerful sequence, actually. And then the 7th instance is the last scene of the movie, and I love this scene. I love this scene so much. And, you know, I've always known that Shia LaBeouf is a brilliant actor ever since he was on that show, Even Stevens. I didn't really watch that show, but I remember Shia did a movie on the Disney Channel or something when he was, like, young. Shia LaBeouf is a few years younger than I am, like maybe 4 or 5 years younger than I am. And he played, I don't know, he played a character that was, like, autistic or something, and I'm like, oh my god, that kid is brilliant. That kid is, like, such a good actor. I was not surprised when his movie Disturbia was a hit. Hollywood seemed to have been shocked, but I don't know why, but I knew that that kid was a star. So the fact that Disturbia made so much money at the theater, I'm like, yeah, duh, like, it's Shia LaBeouf. And again, Shia LaBeouf gives a brilliant performance in Honey Boy as his father, because I forget while I'm watching it that it's Shia playing his father. You know, I forget because he's, like, in makeup, you know, like they've balded his head. They've put, like weave in his hair or whatever. Like, he doesn't look like Shia. He looks like how his father used to look. So I kind of forget while I'm watching the movie that, Shia is playing his father. And anyway, we get to the last scene of the movie, and Otis comes in, he's done the work in rehab, and he's figured out why he has PTSD, and he's figured out why he drinks and blah, blah, blah. So he's sitting at the pool at the place. In the movie, his father still lives at the motel where he lived with him when he was a kid. I don't know if that's true to real life. When you adapt a screenplay from your real life, some of the things you keep and some of the things you make up. That's just how it is when you do an adaptation. I did an adaptation of an instance that happened in my life called NOS, and I'll leave that link down in the description as well. But, you make choices. Anyway, we get to the 7th instance, which is the last instance of this chicken motif. And in the scene, Otis comes back to the motel where he grew up with his father. His father comes out of their room, and he's fully clad in rodeo clown makeup, has all the clown makeup on his face and everything, has his glasses on. He and Otis go to the pool, and they put their feet in the water. And I'm not sure if this is actually happening in the movie or if this is like Otis imagining what it would be like if he talked to his father. I don't know. He does, and I love how it's not like this long drawn out conversation of you did this to me and I messed up because of you. It wasn't like that at all, because I feel like a lot of what his father gave him, I felt like he turned it into appreciation and used it as inspiration and fuel for his acting career. So they're sitting at the pool, and Otis says, first of all, James tells him, which I love this line in the movie. He says, you know what? Nobody's mad at me. Nobody's mad at me anymore. That's all I've ever wanted, for nobody to be mad at me anymore. And then he tells Otis, it's going to happen for you, but like, I have like reached my goal that nobody's mad at me. Of course, he doesn't say it over and over again like that. He says it like one time, and it's like so powerful. And Otis says, Dad, like, I'm going to make a movie about you. And then this is like my favorite line. James says to him, well, make me look good, honey boy. And I'm like, oh! And then nearby, like they pull the camera back, and nearby is a chicken. That chicken walking along. And I'm just like, brilliant. So this is what I think the chicken represents. So I was reading a book by William Zissner called On Writing Well, because I was getting ready to start working on my memoir. And he quotes a line from this essay called The Hen. It's like this really random essay called The Hen. And in the essay, it talks about how the chicken was a representation of vaudeville. And if you are not aware of what vaudeville was kind of like an unrespectable form of theater, like traveling theater. And they traveled, and also sometimes they were like stationary, and they might perform in a beer hall or something. Vaudeville started in like the 1850s and 1860s in the United States. It started in France, but then it kind of moved over to the United States. And a lot of times it was like really rowdy and obscene when it first started out, because the audience was like men in beer halls. But fast forward like 30 years later, in like the 1890s, at that point, vaudeville got a little bit more respectable. Okay, so what I think the chicken represents is the different phases, or the different levels that each person, James and Otis, was able to reach in their career. There is a lot in the movie about the fact that James did not have a very successful performing career. There's a lot in the movie about James is there helping Otis because he has to, because I'll get into that in other videos, but there's some of that like resentment that I can never do what you do, but I believe in you, and so I'm gonna teach you what I know. So I feel like the chicken represents the level of success that James was able to reach, which wasn't very high. and then the level of success that his son was able to reach as an actor, which is like through the roof. Even if he wasn't like a super huge star when he was a 12-year-old, James believed that Otis could make it to the level of super success and stardom in Hollywood. He brings that out in a scene where he says, you know, your mother doesn't really believe in you, which is why she has a job. You know, I don't have a job because I know you're going to make it. You know, and that could be a little, people could read that however they want to read it. That is irrelevant. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to point out what makes it such a great, powerful, emotional story. And that it definitely is a hell of a powerful movie. The script is amazing. Those 7 instances are the chicken motif. As you notice, it seems like when someone is putting a motif through their screenplay, they're able to fit in about probably 6 to 8 in a screenplay. A 2 hour to an hour and a half to a 2 hour movie will fit about 6 to 8 references to the motif. So that's something you want to think about if you are deciding to use that aspect or element of screenwriting in your work. So if you have any comments about the video, please leave a comment down below. I love to hear what you have to say. I love to hear what you have to say if you've seen the movie, because I just think it's such a brilliant script and a brilliant movie. If you haven't seen it, what are you waiting for? Check it out. It's like free on Amazon Prime. If you have a subscription to Amazon Prime, you can just watch the movie. You don't even have to rent it or buy it. It's just available with the subscription. So go ahead, check it out. Like, I love the movie. I've watched it 3 times, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna watch it again because I just love the movie, and I love just what Shia did with the script. So I hope you liked this video. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to tune in when I post the next couple videos about the different scenes that I really loved in Honey Boy. And until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.